Now, from the left coast, another in-depth interview from Peter B. Collins. Peter B's been talking about news and politics since Watergate and generously shares his knowledge, wisdom, opinions, and outrage here because his friends and family can't take it anymore. Peter B's an independent progressive who upsets Democrats and Republicans as conditions require and is one of the few lefty pundits who predicted Trump would win. This podcast is funded entirely by listeners like you, and subscribers get first access to these in-depth interviews. When you're ready, go to peterbcollins.com/sign up.
Never
now,
mind.
Here's your humble host, Peter B. Collins.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm presenting the first of the last interviews from peterbcollins.com as I prepare to amble off, stage left, into retirement. I'm circling back to some of my favorite people who I've talked to over the years on this podcast and on the radio programs that preceded it. And today, one Thomas C. Frank joins us again. He's the author of the seminal What's the Matter with Kansas?, The Wrecking Crew, Listen Liberal, and most recently, The People Know. And he told me in our recent conversation that he is planning to get off the political escalator at the end of this election cycle, whenever it ends. I'm sorry, the Human Mall has been closed due to COVID restrictions. Tom Frank, thanks for joining me again today. How you doing?
Mr. Collins, it's good to be here, as always.
Well, I always enjoy bantering with you, and I'm glad you made time for us. And I also appreciate that you didn't say thank you for having me.
Oh, sorry about that. Peter B., thank you for having me. What can I do for you today? How about that one?
Yeah. Well, a gin and tonic would be a good way to start. So I want to first get your thoughts about where we are in this bizarre and chaotic election cycle, because the last piece that I have from you is November 7th in The Guardian. You may have published something else since, but and you noted you opened with "Ding Dong, the jerk is gone." But I really hate to give any credence to Bill Maher's predictions, but he was right that this guy just doesn't want to go. And
no, he won't concede. That's right. I didn't say he would either. Come on, you and I talked about this before, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
He's never going to concede. I doubt he'll even show up to Biden's inauguration. But Biden's inauguration will take place nevertheless.
Well, and he'll trash tweet during the entire affair.
Yeah, he'll sit there on the dais and type mean things with his thumbs. Yeah.
Well, he'll do it from Mar-a-Lago or from some other safe space for him and his people.
Yeah. No, it's all about delegitimizing Biden, which they also did to Obama and which they also did to Bill Clinton. They always do this, although obviously Trump is going a little further, or shall we say doing it in a different way than the others. I mean, this emphatically insisting without benefit of evidence that he's been robbed. It's embarrassing,
Well, it is. And I have these mixed feelings because I didn't buy into Russiagate and St. Bob Mueller's limited hangout investigation. Yep. And so,
you and me both.
So when Trump,
wait, you went too fast here. Since we're summarizing a lot of stuff in the past, there's a lot to be said about that. Like, why didn't you go in for Russiagate? I can tell you why I didn't go in for it.
Well, you start, and I'll
because it was so clearly an excuse for these people who lost the election of 2016. And the evidence for it, the Steele dossier, was always so sketchy.
Yeah.
I'd look around at I would used to, when I was touring in 2017, back when you could still do book tours, people would say, "Why aren't you writing about this?" And it's like, I don't have any contacts at the CIA. Every single one of these stories is somebody from the CIA or the FBI leaking to a reporter from the Washington Post. I don't know anybody like that. All I'm doing is just looking at it from the outside, and there's nothing for me to report. It's it's very clearly some people trying to come up with a reason why they lost an election that should have been easy to win. Okay, now your turn.
Well, it's clear that back in J school, you skipped the access journalism class.
I didn't go to J school. I went to H school, history.
Well, for me, it really was the anonymous sources, the repeated leaks, the reference to documents we were told that somebody read to the reporter over the phone. And, to me, it's very unfortunate that the mainstream media outlets went so deep into it, because it created the basis for the fake news attacks that Trump has used so effectively.
Yes.
They have.
And there's another interesting thing about it, which is, this is a bad press foul up. This is a bad screw up. And as far as I can tell, nobody has got in any kind of trouble for it.
Yeah.
It did, and it also, what else it did? It hurt a lot of more sensible criticism of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just said, it allowed him to brush everything off as the media is out to get me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which I kind of think they are. The Washington media, they clearly regard him as not part of the gang.
Right.
But he deserves everything they throw at him, as long as it's truthful. So you've got this situation where I don't really like either side. We're in the strangest times. Okay, now your turn.
Well, absolutely we are. And Tom, the other elements of this were the flip-flop of the Democratic Party, which was once skeptical of the spy community, the so-called intelligence community, particularly after the sale of the Iraq War to the public based on false representations from George Tenet and his whole crew. And so that lesson has been completely obliterated as, John Brennan and Jimmy Clapper, they now have paid perches on cable news channels where they are seen as these sages who are out to protect us from the demon Trump. And so the other shift has been that the Democratic Party is now much more neocon. It's a pro-war party. They are aghast that Trump wants to pull our paltry remaining troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. They know that...
Okay. Red light.
Okay.
What's the game that kids play? Now you have to stop.
Okay.
Because that's really interesting. If Trump really wants to pull our troops out of Afghanistan, and he's been promising that since he became president, wouldn't that be something if they finally ended that war? And you're exactly right. There are Democrats out there complaining about this. This is the party that basically redefined who they were because of the Vietnam War. That is foundational for the Democratic Party that we have today. And they're the pro-war party. I almost can't believe it. It's such a strange time. And again, this is not to say that Donald Trump has been a good president or anything like that. I think he's been dreadful. I think he's a scoundrel. I can't believe he ever got elected. But if he wants to, do something good, let the guy do it. For God's sakes, don't get in his way.
Well, and we now know that the goons lied to him about exactly how many troops we had in Syria. And he repeatedly called to get our troops out of Syria. Then he accepted this limited oil watch operation in the northeast quadrant. And the Democrats suddenly were in love with the Kurds. And by golly, we've got to protect those Kurds that we have trashed and manipulated and used as cannon fodder for years. And, of course, Obama invited Turkey into the clusterfuck in Syria. And
you're not allowed to say that on the radio.
I'm not on the radio. Uh, and so, all of this just becomes this huge ball that the public can no longer process. And so they fall in line along tribal divisions. And it's just, if Trump wants to pull troops out, he's bad. And, it's one of the few things that I have endorsed that he has attempted to do.
Yeah, but the truth is he hasn't done it yet. Now, to speculate a little about the future, I strongly suspect that Trump's motive for doing what he's doing right now, refusing to concede, pretending that the election was stolen from him, et cetera, is so that he can go and sulk and pretend to be a kind of government in exile for a few years and then run again, or set up one of his kids or one of his allies to run in 2024. And that's why he's doing this. But what would be a really interesting move, if that's his goal, would be pulling the troops out of Afghanistan and basically daring the Democrats to put them back in. And the reason that would be so fascinating is because that would cement in the public mind the image of Trump's Republicans as, okay, I almost can't believe I'm going to say this. I might throw up here, Peter. to cement the image in the public mind of Trump's Republicans as the peace party.
Yeah.
I can't believe I just said that. Do you remember how we used to go after George W. Bush? I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
Do you remember those days? I mean,
yeah.
God. And now here's anyhow.
He
so
seems
that's
like
why I think it won't actually come to pass. But if it does, you just think about how that would drive a wedge into the Democrats. I mean, there's so many Democrats, myself included, who would be, if however much we despise Donald Trump, if he really is the candidate of peace, wow. That would be extraordinary, wouldn't it? I mean, that would cause me problems. Let's put it that way. It would cause cognitive dissonance.
And here's a factor here's a factor that complicates it even further, Tom, and that is we're told that in the inner councils of the Obama administration, when the two different surges into Afghanistan were being discussed, Joe Biden opposed them.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
And now, he's on kind of the other side of this coin. So if Trump draws down troops in Afghanistan, and as expected, the talks with the Taliban collapse, and the puppet government that we've been funding and propping up for 19 years collapses, as it inevitably will, what will the Democrats do? He's surrounding himself with hawks, and what would Susan Rice do?
Yeah.
And we don't have comforting speculation in response to those questions.
Yeah, it's we don't know yet. It's just we're in a. It sometimes feels like we're in a whole new world, and everything that we've thought about the two political parties is going to turn out to be wrong. But I mean, no, it can't be. It can't be that. Okay, so let's go on to something else. Let's talk about some other aspect of this guy.
Okay,
he's a jerk. He's an asshole. He's still president. He doesn't want to leave. He likes being president. He's you look back over the 4 years of all the dickish stuff that he's said and done. Mm-hmm. Absolutely disastrous. Get him out of there. That's what I say.
So
there you go.
Let me ask you to comment on this, because yesterday I led my daily podcast by asking the question, will Trump's desperate attempts to cling to power, and in particular to overturn the results of the presidential vote count in Georgia, actually completely backfire, leave him out in the cold? I don't believe that this recount is turning up more than a few thousand votes in his favor. And his intervention in the Senate runoff races, which are critical, scheduled for January 5th, actually could flip the Senate to the Democrats. And, he's had Lindsey Graham try to mau Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State there. He got the senators, the Republican senators, to call for Raffensperger's resignation. And it's a clear muscle effort to, get him to change the votes and do something to put Trump back in the lead there. But ultimately, I think it could benefit the Democrats by complicating the ground game in Georgia for this special election in January.
Yeah, it sure could. It's I agree with you that it's not going to succeed. It's certainly not going to give him the state. It's not going to flip the state. He's too far behind for that, and it does look so bad. It's so scummy that it might well have the effect you describe. Now, let's since we're both talking about retiring from politics, I'm going to continue writing. It'll just be about other things. But since we're talking about that, let's game this out a little further. Clearly, the election, Trump is in some ways doing us a favor because he is hammering at the election system with everything he's got. Armies of lawyers, millions of dollars. Putting pressure on the system in all of these ways that we've never seen someone do before. And he's going to show us where the system is weak. I don't think the results aren't going to change, but we're going to suddenly know where the system is weak. What do we do then with that knowledge? Do we fix the system? I mean, I want to make sure that something like this never happens again, but I'm afraid, since I just wrote that book about anti-populism, do you remember the last, sort of the end of the story of the original populist party in the 1890s? The way they killed this party in the South was by disenfranchising people, specifically black voters, but also a lot of poor whites. And so you had like the voting rolls in, say, Louisiana or something like that went from, 400,000 people to like 10,000, overnight. And they did this all over the South, so that all of a sudden the people who could vote, it was a very small number of people. Now, all the constitutional protections that we have today were in place back then. I mean, they wrote these laws so that they appeared to be, race neutral, right? It was that they had a poll tax, and they had a
test.
Literacy test.
Yeah.
And then they had something called a grandfather clause, so that people who were illiterate, but that they wanted them to vote, they could get them out of it. It was just like, it's diabolical what they did, and the poll tax was not insignificant. It was enough money so that if you are a sharecropper or something like that, you're not going to pay it. It was a substantial amount. And the literacy test could be adjusted so that someone like you or me would not be able to pass it if the guy giving the test so chose. It was that evil, what they did. And in other states, they did other things, but it always involved changing the electoral system to make sure that populism, left-wing movements like that never happened again. And I wonder, we're in a very anti-populist period right now, and I wonder if we're not going to see, the Republicans already have done similar things. I mean, much, much, much less significant than what they did, 100 years ago, like voter ID laws and stuff like that, which are, really insignificant. But they do disqualify some people around the edges. And they turn the polling place into a policed area, which is what they really want. They want to have cops there in the polling place to intimidate voters. That's what they're really after. And but I can see Democrats joining in that game. Everything else is going backwards. He's going sideways these days. Why not that too? Where all of our liberals are now like really into war. Why shouldn't they also be into coming up with vote restrictions too? And there are, I did find when I was doing my research for the book, a political theorist, he's not particularly liberal, he's more of a libertarian, who does propose that we have some kind of knowledge test that voters have to take a test. But this time he says it'll be fair. It'll be universal. It won't be at the discretion of whatever county authority or something like that. But a test where you have to basically prove that you agree with mainstream economics before you can vote.
Oh, well, I
thought
it might be more of a civics thing, and the new senator.
Well, that's what he would call it. They would call it that, of course, but
the new senator from Alabama couldn't pass it. Tommy Tuberville.
I know.
He doesn't know the three branches. Well, there's the branch you lynch on, and then. All right, so let me ask you about this. One of the gambits here is a partial recount of the liberal strongholds in Wisconsin. And this makes absolutely no sense because the analysis shows that in the big cities that Trump is targeting his ire, Philly, Detroit, and Milwaukee, the vote count showed that Trump actually got more votes in 20
he actually overperformed,
than he did in 16, and the Democrats were flat. And the other piece of this, Tom, is that this was the brilliant strategery that allowed the Supreme Court to intervene in Florida in 2000 and award the election to Bush under the Equal Protection Claim. And so what is Trump trying to do? It must be more brilliance from Rudy. But either that or it was the discount. He didn't want to pay the full freight for a statewide recount. So he's going to recount the Democratic strongholds?
Oh, is this really going to happen?
Yeah. They wired $3 million to Wisconsin.
Oh, so if seriously, it's a coin op system. You put in your $3 million and they do a recount for you.
If it had been closer, the state would pay for it. But because it wasn't within that narrow of a margin, Trump has to prepay, and if he is successful in overturning the result, the state would refund his money.
I see. But it's not close. If that's their rules and he's able to and he wants to pay for it, then knock yourself out.
But how can he possibly hope to get this in front of Amy and the gang to do their magic when he is paralleling the faulty case that was advanced by the Democrats in Bush v. Gore?
I'm sorry, you've lost me there. The thing is, the critical thing about Florida, remember, is it was so goddamn close. Right. These, I don't think any of the results you're talking about are that close. I mean, Florida was like, what was it? It was 500 something.
537.
Yeah, that's at the end. It was probably even closer. We don't really know. That was one screwed up situation. But for Trump to prevail, he basically has to get a miracle has to happen in all of these states, right? I mean. Yeah. Well, it's not going to happen. That's just crazy.
I don't see it. And also,
he's so incompetent that his incompetence during COVID was just so outrageous and overwhelming. It's funny that now he swings into action but he's incompetent at this too. He has no idea what he's doing. Have you been following like Rudy Giuliani's flounderings in court?
Well, Rush Limbaugh was playing an audio clip from Rudy's brilliant courtroom dance. and the guy, he just lays out these generalities. Everybody knows that people come from Camden into Philadelphia so they can vote twice. Everybody,
that stands up in a court of law. That's good enough because everybody knows it.
No, the judge laughed at him.
Okay,
but
good.
That doesn't stop him from doing it. And so I don't know. I find it really, really strange. I want to come back to what you were.
Well, look, Peter. At the end of the day, this is who Trump is. This is the kind of stuff he does, and we knew he was going to do this even before the election. And I'm really pleased to see that that none of it is working, and he's not going to flip a single one of these states.
Now, you raised the issue about Democrats and any kind of election reform. And, I've been a longtime critic since 2000 of the electoral system, the vulnerabilities in the voting machines and the networks that are used to tabulate, and all of these issues. And I believe that there was massive effort invested in rigging this election before the votes were counted, by purging voter rolls in Georgia, for example, not accepting bona fide new voter registrations. There are all kinds of games that were played. But once the election occurred, my view of this is that it's been pretty up and up in how the votes have been counted, and there was a fairly rigorous process here, not to rush to projecting a winner before there was enough data to do that. And so my experience has been that Democrats recognize, they will, off mic acknowledge that the system is a huge mess and that they lose elections in many cases because of that. But the people who do get elected take the position, it ain't broke because I got elected.
Yep, exactly right.
And that's
also why we don't. That's also why we don't have third parties anymore, because I was mentioning about populism, the last big third party. When that died down, they outlawed in every state, just about. There's a few exceptions. They outlawed the sort of tactical maneuvers that populists used to make in order to win elections. Which it was something called fusion. And they made it illegal. And there's no good reason for it to be illegal. It's just that the two parties don't want that to ever happen again. And, so they basically, their duopoly is in law, and then a couple of other things. But their duopoly is in law, and they have no interest in changing that. It would be a more democratic country if you had a robust, system where a third party could challenge from time to time. But they don't want that. They like it the way it is. And so it's extremely unlikely it will ever change.
Well, and that's a great setup to shift to your piece that was in The Guardian on the 7th of November, because you reiterate what I think was the central thesis in Listen Liberal, that the Democratic Party has kind of zoomed down a cul-de-sac and has wedged itself in as the party of professionals, of Silicon Valley, of Haim Saban and other big money donors who have very specific agendas, and that it has turned its back on working families and the people who are now claimed by Trump, the angry white workers who are disaffected and have good reason to be upset. And so until the Democratic Party, and it's not going to happen under Joe Biden's leadership, until it has a reckoning and really comes to terms with this, I think we're stuck with this 72 million cell of Trump-leaning voters. And that is going to be a threat to the Democrats for a long time going forward.
Yep. And it is, and you, by the way, you put that very well. You're so much better at this game than I am, Peter B. But that is exactly right. And it's not, by the way, just so that your listeners know, and you and I have talked about this before, it's not, when I say that the Democrats have become the party of this sort of affluent electorate, this, white collar suburban elite of this country, it's not reading between the lines. They talk about this, they planned this, they wanted it that way, and they did it. And that's who they are now. That's the Joe Biden campaign. That's what it was all about, was reaching out to those people, and the Hillary campaign before him, and going back further and further and further. They are right out in the open talking about this. If you read their their in-house magazines and the books that they write from time to time, and this kind of thing. It's not secret, and and neither is it what the Republicans have been doing. I mean, I wrote about this myself in 2004. Remember, that's when you and I first met. What's the Matter with Kansas? It was called, about the Republicans reaching out to these disgruntled, and I think disgruntled for a good reason, disgruntled white working class voters. And I said, I don't know if I said this at the time, but I've certainly said it since then. Oh yeah, this isn't What's the Matter with Kansas. That it's today it is the so-called white working class, but tomorrow they'll reach out to different groups. This is not, this kind of pseudo left that people like Trump have invented. And it didn't start with Trump. It started back in the days of Nixon and Reagan. But this kind of pseudo populism that these people espouse is very, very, very attractive. It is super explosive. It's dynamic stuff. And if you don't head it off, these guys are going to continue to win. And what do I mean by headed off? I mean, the thing is, when the Democratic Party decided they didn't want to be a party that, answers to working class organizations and that cares about middle class families, et cetera. So remember their old rhetoric from the old days, when they decided to put all that behind them and become this different thing, this party of Silicon Valley, et cetera, big pharma, Wall Street, when they made that big move, they paved the way for these guys. They made Trumpism possible. And so my argument is that they can also unmake it. They can also take it away, and they're not going to do it, of course. I mean, it's all just wishful thinking. It's just a way of getting the argument out there. But why not? Why not dream, right?
Well, and Tom, there have been two different lines of analysis of the election results, and they destroy rubrics on each side. So for the Republicans, their massive efforts to keep people from voting this year through every available means appears to be extremely misguided, as Trump drew more votes from blacks and Latinos than he did in 2016 and racked up this 72 million, minority. It's a huge plurality. And
by the way, okay, stop. That Trump did so well among black voters is really, really remarkable. And I think they said it was the best anyone has done since 1960. Did I read that? Is that right? So that's since before the civil rights days, when the Democratic Party really nailed down its sort of alliance with the black electorate. I mean, they were already part of the Democratic coalition since the 1930s, but the 60s made it ironclad. And this is crazy. Now it's going the other direction. Okay, it's actually not crazy because I don't know if you noticed this, Peter. I certainly did. During the 2020 campaign, there were all of these expressions of black, by black spokesmen, celebrities, of just like incredible annoyance with the Democratic Party for taking them for granted. And I think, I would be that it pisses me off too. I thought, again, very righteous annoyance with the Democratic Party. What was that? Who am I thinking? Oh, it was Ice Cube, the rapper. Right. He had this very matter of fact thing that he did on like Instagram or something where he said, like, what are you going to do? Okay, Biden, you're the candidate. Now, what are you going to do for us? And he was so pissed off and so clear about this. And it was just like, I loved it because it's just perfect American rhetoric, the way that he talks. But yeah, it's going back the other way now. And here's what I'm getting at. The Democratic Party in its wisdom has treated black voters and Latinos and others as a kind of captured constituency. For a long time, they treated unions that way too. They still do, really. Yeah. They treat these groups as a captured constituency, meaning they don't have to do anything for them. They get their votes no matter what. And suddenly that strategy is not working anymore. And here's the thing. They got used to getting about 90% of the black vote. And if the Democratic, if that ever declines to say like 80%, they are in enormous trouble as a party. And so Trump himself is on his way out, but every Republican strategist in America saw that and they're like, oh my God, if all they have to do is win a little bit more with this part of the public and they're gonna triumph all over the map. this is extraordinary, and this is I never thought this would happen with Trump because he's such a bigot. You know, he just turns people away.
Mm-hmm.
So I never thought Trump would be able to pull this off. I thought it would have to be a successor to Trump who would try to pull this off. I'm kind of surprised that he himself was able to do it. But that is the most fascinating thing to come out of this election.
Okay, you just rambled into my second rubric and ruined the setup. And
Sorry.
I was about
just play a song or something.
Well, I was about to channel Kamala and say, "I'm speaking. I'm speaking. You've got a fly on your head, and I'm speaking." But let me just kind of affirm what you were just saying, because, yes, for decades, the Democrats have felt that the far left and that blacks are wedged in to whoever they run, and you don't have to do much for them. And I also feel that, we've got a little distance now on the summer of unrest. But that was all about police misconduct. And the Democratic convention focused on Black Lives Matter. We had black hosts, and there were just all these repeated references. They're trying to wash away Joe's sordid record on criminal justice.
Okay, there's another fascinating point that really did not get made all that well. That, it's just, think about the irony of that for a second, that in this great year of Black Lives Matter, the Democratic standard bearer is the author of the crime bill of 1994. It's like, what the hell?
Yep.
How did that happen? And then more to the point, how come Trump didn't make more of an issue of that? I mean, he tried, right? But Trump is such a bad politician. You give me a real politician like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, and they would have never let the public forget that.
Yeah.
They would have just destroyed that guy.
For
his role.
Trump was content to try to rally the whites around law and order, and he didn't really, I think, feel that he could get as far as he did in attracting black voters. And also, Kanye West, what the fuck was that about?
Did he, by the way, whatever happened with him? I haven't heard anything about him since the election.
Well, he was on the ballot as a presidential candidate in 9 or 10 states. He was on in California as the VP of a minor party. And I still don't understand, what kind of stalking horse he was, who put him up to it. We know that Trump's lawyers helped him get on the ballot in a few states.
Yeah.
So I just cannot figure that out. It is an enduring puzzle.
Well, I don't have any insight on that. It's really, really, really strange. And did he get any votes anywhere? I mean,
I haven't checked. I don't know. All right, I want to kind of circle back.
By the way, it was also interesting all the different rappers that endorsed Trump. That was kind of a new twist. I wasn't expecting that one.
Well, they like low taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I want to come back to the problems in the Democratic Party, because since the election, Abigail Spanberger has become more of a household name by blaming the loss of the swing districts that were picked up in 2018 on the progressives and on defund the police in particular and Medicare for all secondarily. And I think that AOC and Bernie and others have pushed back appropriately. But this is the real virus in the Democratic Party. They have recruited all of these former spies and military veterans. We had fighter pilots running against Mitch and against John Cornyn. And they really, I think...
They've been doing that for years, by the way. This goes back to Rahm Emanuel's strategy. And what year was it?
It would have been 2000.
It was when Bush was president.
2005, 2006, because Pelosi became Speaker in 2007.
Yeah. But they've actually transformed their own party, according to their playbook. It's... I guess I should rewrite Listen Liberal. I mean, just 3 years now, and I need to write a new edition of it or something. Okay, but keep going.
Well, my point is that they misread the whole picture because they are relying on polls. So they are following the voters instead of leading them. And the other huge mistake here is that Spanberger and Connor Lamb from Pittsburgh, they're operating in purple to red districts. And they assume that the rest of the country is all like that, and that we in the liberal parts of the country need to just give up any aspirations and fall in line and say, okay, this is a center-right nation. The Democratic Party is going to be center-right, just a little less right than the Republicans.
Wait. Okay, stop.
Yes?
It can't be a center-right nation. By definition, the nation is the center.
I know, but this is what the polls depict.
Mr. Collins.
This is what the polls depict, and they follow the polls instead of leading. And there's one other critical part of this.
You're telling me that it goes to 11. No, it's a center. The nation is the center.
All right.
So whatever the nation is the center.
Tommy, put that aside, okay?
Okay, all right, I'll drop that.
The most important part of this is that Abigail Spanberger is telling other Democrats to sit down and shut up because she cannot refute the lies that are peddled by the Republicans, that the Democrats are socialist, communist, and, all of that crazy crap that Trump has been promoting this entire year. And so they really want the party to align with the mischaracterizations of the Republicans.
Yeah. The first thing I would say, and this is just incredibly obvious, universal health care is really popular, especially in a pandemic. And had they emphasized that a lot more, they might not have had all the problems that they did. That's the kind of issue that is capable of cutting into the Trump coalition. I mean, that's the kind of thing they need to do, that they need to get behind. Now, I mean, you know the numbers on this. It's like 70 or 80%. And it has been ever since 1948 when Harry Truman ran on it and won, his second term as president. That was his issue, was universal health care. The Republicans were able to stop him. But it's been popular forever. Medicare, for example, is extremely popular. It is anybody that knows anything about Canada knows that this is something that you want and you need in a pandemic. Okay, that said, I don't know what kind of Democrat this is that doesn't know how to deal with the charge of socialism. It's like they always call Democrats that.
Yes,
they've been doing that forever.
Right.
If you don't know how to deal with that, you probably shouldn't be in politics. That's like they're not going to stop doing that if you change your position on the issues. They're not going to stop. They're never going to stop. It doesn't matter what you say. So you have to learn how to, get a thick skin and deal with that.
Well, this
just seems obvious to me.
This extends to what occurred in the primary, where we started out with 24 or more of these candidates, mostly moderates, and they did everything they could to deep six Bernie Sanders and the slightly less left Elizabeth Warren. And,
now Bernie does call himself a socialist, and I think that's a mistake on his part.
I agree. And he doesn't properly define what he means by it.
Yep. Because he thinks it just means a New Deal Democrat, and that's not what it is. And anyhow, I don't know why he does that except to distinguish himself from the sort of annoying centrist Democrats. And yeah, there needs to be a distinction. I agree, but he does that, and it rubs people the wrong way, and I don't know why he does it. Anyhow, that's neither here nor there.
Well, and I have offered him free advice that apparently he didn't hear or comprehend, which is to define his democratic socialism as the antidote to extreme capitalism. And when you frame it that way, with reference to the wealth and income gap and the plight of low-income Americans today, I think you have a pretty persuasive package. People under 40 are not offended by the term. It's boomers who have this allergy to the term socialism.
Well, they remember the Cold War.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But
it's scary, et cetera, et cetera. But it's so absurd. It's so silly. It just keeps you from looking clearly at how society is actually set up. By the way, I saw one of my favorite lines. It's socialism for the people on top, and that's never been more clear than during this pandemic.
Yeah.
Small businesses are going to the wall. Unemployment is out of control. People are struggling. They can't pay their rent. They can't pay their utility bills. If your wealth is based on the stock market, though, Peter,
yes,
you are doing great right now.
Yes, I am.
I mean, no, that was speculative. I didn't mean you.
No, I have shared with my listeners that a big part of my retirement is in the stock market, and it shocks me to see the gains that people who own equities have made. First, under the Trump aura in the early years of this term, and more recently because the Fed has been so massively propping up Wall Street. That even companies that are not showing significant earnings, the stock price keeps going up just on speculation. And I'll just also share that I've made big moves to diversify in view of my prediction that there is going to be a crash. That if there is no more bailout money from Washington, the states are going to crater in the next fiscal year. And the cutbacks in services, the loss of jobs there is going to lead to a second deep dip that could be a depression. And so I think that at some point the Fed will have to stop juicing up the market and that there's going to be a huge correction.
Wow. And our guy Biden will be Johnny on the spot to take the fall, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, the traps that Biden is walking into, it's hard to identify all of them, but they are numerous and pretty deadly. Take, for example...
and we know how Mitch McConnell is going to behave, too, because of what he did under Obama, which is to just obstruct and obstruct and obstruct. Don't let him do anything and make sure, that the cratering is entirely blamed on the president. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, one of the traps, which is not economic, is about Iran. And Biden, I think appropriately, is saying he wants to get back into the six-nation JCPOA. Israel is going to do everything they can to block that. And they have a lot of allies in the Democratic leadership that Joe Biden is populating his cabinet with.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not as serious. That's just right. I mean, what you're describing, that's just a diplomatic, kerfluffle. A world, depression. That's serious.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tom, before we wrap up here, I did want to quiz you a little bit about your plans because my listeners are pretty familiar with mine. But you have pledged that you're going to stop writing about politics and, I guess to some extent, political history. Is it true that you?
There's one thing that I've got. I'm sorry, I talked over you again.
Yes,
I'm shutting
you did.
up now.
And I have a really poignant question here. Is the rumor true that you have been signed as a high-priced correspondent for the Epoch Times?
Oh, would that it were so, Mr. Collins.
I mean, I'd love to see you take on Falun Gong and the Shen Yun trapeze artists all at the same time.
I should try that. That would be. So I have to tell you that just when I first met you, and What's the Matter with Kansas came out, and it was a big bestseller, and I was on I did a lot of radio in those days, and I did a lot of TV, and I was on NPR a lot. And I even used to be on NPR before that, when the preceding book came out, One Market Under God, which was about the stock market. Nobody remembers anymore. At least I think I was. I could be confusing two different things. But I don't know how this has happened, Mr. Collins, but basically I am now just completely outside the kind of gatekeeper media in this country. And I think I'm doing some of the best work I've ever done. You read The People Know. I mean, in my new book, the one about populism, I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I'm really proud of it.
I would call it just short of brilliant.
Well, thank you. I can't get anywhere with it, and which is strange, because I think it's objectively better than some of the other things that I've done. It's better edited. It's to the point. It's got great illustrations. On and on and on and on. Well, it doesn't make any difference. Somehow I have been completely frozen out, and the only media, and I'm not. Look, I shouldn't complain. I do what I do, and I put it out there in the world, and they like it or they don't like it, and I can live with it either way. But I just feel like I've come to the end of something.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to the end of my sort of string. I've said what I had to say about politics. It's all out there. It's not going to change. I mean, it's going to get worse. There's going to be another Trump. There's, the Democrats are going to keep moving towards what they call the center. We might even see the parties change positions. Remember what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. If that continues, and the Republicans continue to pretend to be populists, one of these days we're going to wake up and they might be the real thing, and the Democrats keep pretending to be Eisenhower Republicans. One of these days we're going to wake up and they're really going to be that, and that could happen.
Uh-huh.
But otherwise, everything that I've written, it's not going to change. And I don't really have anything more to say about it. But when I go back and look at what the work I was doing before I got sidetracked with politics, when I was writing about business and culture and, art and that kind of thing, there's so much more to do in that subject area. I mean, it's a wide world, Mr. Collins, and there's many, many, many things to talk about out there. And I need to get back to some of those other things, is what I think. Now, that said, that is my plan. But that said, there's something that I'm working on that I can't tell you about right now.
Oh,
that
yeah.
if it actually comes to pass, then I will be doing more politics crap.
Oh, okay.
But we'll see. I mean, I'd say it's about a 50-50 chance of it actually happening. And in that case, you'll be the first to know.
Yeah, I see.
Actually, you won't be, because you'll be gone.
That's right.
You'll be enjoying your Trump-begotten winnings somewhere on a beach somewhere.
They won't let me go to any beaches. We're all locked. We're all locked down right now.
Well, here's what you need to do. You get a sailboat. Okay, you learn how to sail. You watch a YouTube video about it. You learn how to sail.
Tom,
and you sail to Hawaii.
Tom, I have a sailboat. I've been sailing since I was 12.
Well, sail to Hawaii, and haven't they got COVID stamped out there?
No, you have to quarantine for 14 days unless you can
unless
present.
You snuck in under in the dark of night on your own sailboat.
No, which
is what you're going to do.
They're now allowing visitors who have tested negative within 72 hours of arrival in Hawaii.
Okay.
So it is on my list as soon as I can clear the quarantine.
I've been reading about the maritime provinces in Canada. You know what I'm talking about? They have no COVID cases there.
Yeah.
They stamped it out, and then they actually quarantined themselves from not only from the U.S. but from the rest of Canada. So people are going to the beach there, except for that it's really cold.
I did a story last week, and I am now straining to recall where this settlement is, but there's a place called Nunavut in Canada.
I know where that is. Yeah.
And Nunavut had no COVID cases, but somebody showed up and brought it in, and it has spread like wildfire through the whole community. So
that's terrible.
Nunavut no longer has none. So give us a couple of ideas. Do you have book ideas that are in your head or even, further along? Are you going to?
Yes, there's one that I'm actually supposed to be working on right now. It's a history of creativity. How do you like that?
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So it's going back. My first book was about it was my dissertation in graduate school. It was about the advertising industry in the 1960s, and it was about the story of the advertising industry in those days was what they called the creative revolution. Mm-hmm. And I got really fascinated with this subject. I mean, the story of the advertising industry, Madison Avenue and all that is one thing, but it was part of this larger sort of cultural revolution that was going on in those days, which I'm fascinated with, if not obsessed with. And I sort of want to get back to that subject matter and sort of pick up where I left off with that book.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I want to wish you the best because I do understand exactly what you described. They don't send a town car for you to come on MSNBC anymore, and you've gotten that message. And
I have got that message, and I'm not giving up, Mr. Collins. I'm not. Can you hear that pounding in the background, by the way?
Yes. What are you doing?
That's my 1930s populist heating system in my house.
Oh.
We had a hard freeze here in Maryland last night, and it's real damn cold. And the heating system is this steam heat, and it's the best thing in the world. I mean, there's no kind of cold weather can stop it. It's like this heating system can take anything. But it does, like the pipes, when it turns on, the steam starts going through these cold pipes, and it's just this banging. Anyhow.
Does that keep you up at night?
No, we turn it. It turns. The thermostat. It turns off at night because I like the house to be cold when I sleep. Don't ask me why. It's just one of my things.
Well, I can understand that. I don't like it to be too warm. But it just would seem that at times this would kick in and just wake you up.
It does. It kicks in at like 8 a.m. and boom, 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 and then you get up,
Okay. All right, Tom. Well, I want to thank you for all the great conversations we've had over the years. And
Are you really retiring? I just don't believe it.
Yeah. Well, I'm leaving one door open. I'm going to set up a studio at home, and eventually I think I'll do some occasional podcasts. So I may be, knocking on your door at some point in the future. Thomas C. Frank, the author of What's the Matter with Kansas and numerous other books, and most notably, the recently published The People Know, A Brief History of Anti-Populism. Always great to talk with you, Tom.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Collins. I'm going to miss you. You cannot really retire. You just can't.
I shall. Thanks for listening to the first of my last interviews. Send your comments to peter@peterbcollins.com.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you.